Hello, it's Mr. Turek here, and today we're going to make a double exposure kind of photo illustration. So to do that, you need to first, you need a portrait, and I've taken some portraits here, some with full light and some with just one light source. And then I got some pictures of flowers and some pictures of mountains. You can use kind of whatever you want. Just make sure you have a portrait and make sure the images are kind of similar in size. So the first thing you want to do if you want to check the size is click on the photo you want to use. And if you don't have your detail panel turned on, that's pretty easy to turn on. In File Explorer, just go to View and then click right here on Details pane. This will show you how big your image is. So this image is 5,000 by 3,000 pixels. And if I want to combine that with my mountains over here, I'm just going to click on one of these images. It looks like it's about 1,000 by 1,000. That's not great, but it's okay. You just want to make sure that your images are similar in size, somewhat, you know? Like, let's check one of these flower pictures. Okay, so that's better. This one's 3,000 by 4,000, so that would probably be a better choice. Just make sure your image is not like 100 by 200 pixels, something so small that, you know, if you were to put them together, even if you were to blow it up, like Photoshop can't handle low resolution images and just make up detail. You have to make sure they're somewhat similar in size. So these mountain pictures are not great, but they'll do okay for what we're doing. The next step is to open up Photoshop. So to open up Photoshop, just go right down here to your Start menu, click on it, and then select and click on Adobe Photoshop. I'm running CC 2019. It doesn't really matter which version you're using. This is compatible with pretty much every version of Photoshop, what we're going to do, except for the selective mask workspace. So click on Adobe Photoshop to open it. Once Adobe Photoshop is open, you're going to open up your portrait first. So we're going to go to File, Open, or on the Start screen you can click on this Open button right here. Once the Open dialog box opens up, navigate to your folder. Mine's already open to my folder. I have it saved to my OneDrive account. It's in digital photography. And then I have a folder called Photoshop Examples and a double exposure folder. Try to keep everything together in a folder. So I'm going to open up one of these portraits I haven't used yet for just a challenge today. Let's open this one. Okay, so the file I opened was a CR2 file, which is a raw file format. So before I open it, I can mess with my exposure here, make it a bit brighter, increase the contrast or clarity. I'm just going to play with these sliders a little bit here, you know, just give it a bit more drama, a bit more contrast, turn up my highlights here, my whites, make my blacks really dark. The reason I'm doing this is just because I can. You don't have to do like a single light source portrait like this. You can light yourself however you want, but I'm going to make a lot of shadow area here for my combination. Once you're happy with your settings in your raw file, click Open Image. Alright, when your image opens up, you're going to be doing a lot of work in it, so the first step should be to make sure you save it as a Photoshop file and make sure you save frequently. So go to File, Save As, and then give your file a name. So double exposure 3 for me, because I made 3 or 4 of these. Just make it 4. And then click Save. Make sure you're saving it to your double exposure folder. Alright, so now it's saved as a Photoshop document, and then you're going to want to save frequently so that you don't lose progress. So just hit Control S to save. Anytime you edit something or do a bunch of changes, make sure you don't lose your progress. All right, so our first step here is going to be to crop our photo. I took a photograph with kind of a busy background here. There was a poster hanging up. I should have probably have taken that poster down before I took this photo. That just means our cleanup on our selection is going to be a little bit longer. But let's crop it first. To crop it, go to your crop tool. It's up here in the toolbox. If you hover over it, you'll see a little message display usually. And you'll see these crop bounds when you click on the crop tool. I'm just going to take the corner and bring it in here. It doesn't really matter what dimensions you use. And I'm actually going to put my head on the right hand side here because I'm going to put a mountain picture in here. And it's probably going to take up most of the left hand side. You can kind of crop it however you want. Think about your second image and what you want the composition to be. You can crop it portrait or landscape style. At the very top of your screen, you notice you can select a ratio for your crop. And when you're happy with it, you can check mark the delete crop pixels unless you think you want to change your mind later. And then hit the check mark right here to confirm your crop. Alright, so I've cropped my image. Real quick, I'm going to review how to navigate your file. So switch to the move tool up here. And then the easiest way to navigate your file is to use Control plus and minus. So Control plus zooms in, Control minus zooms out, and your hand tool moves you around the document. So when you zoom in with Control plus, hold down your space bar and use your hand tool to navigate around your document. Again, Control 0 will snap your document back into your window. And then you can also use the Alt key and your scroll wheel on your mouse if you want to use a quicker zoom. Alright, next thing, I'm going to mask out the portrait and kind of get rid of the background. So to make a selection, I'm going to use the quick select tool. That's up here in our toolbox right here. Looks like a paintbrush with a dotted line oval. So click on that tool or hit the W key on your keyboard and make sure you're set to new selection at the top in the control panel. And then we're just going to click and drag to select our object. If you notice your brush is a bit small, you can adjust the size at the very top again, right here, size adjustment. You want it to be kind of fairly large but not too small. And then just click and drag on your portrait here. Our portrait's set against a white background, so it's pretty easy for me to select most of what I want to select. I don't have to do a lot of back and forth. Let's say I accidentally selected something I didn't want. I could hold down the Alt key, and that changes my cursor to a minus, which means now I can kind of paint that away and get rid of that as part of my selection. We could do that down here by the glasses, but there's better ways to refine our selection. So typically, in the old days, you would use a quick mask selection, which is over here in the toolbox. But Photoshop has this new feature called Select and Mask. The Select and Mask workspace is very similar to Quick Mask, and it combines Quick Mask with a couple other tools. So to enter the Select and Mask workspace, click on the top where it says Select and Mask, or go to Select and Mask to enter the Select and Mask workspace. In the Select and Mask workspace, your first view will be called Onion Skin. And I kind of like this view. It's pretty good, but I'm old school. I kind of prefer Overlay, which is from Quick Mask Selections. This just tints what we haven't selected light red, and I just prefer that. So I'm going to switch the view to Overlay. At any point in time, you can switch your view here to help you kind of see what you're doing. And the first tool I'm going to use is my Quick Select tool, which is at the top here. So in the Select and Mask workspace, the first tool you should try is your Quick Select tool. You'll notice that it's pretty similar to the tool, the Quick Select tool in the regular workspace. We have our add to the selection and our subtract from the selection, and then we can adjust our size up here. I'm going to go with these settings, and I'm just gonna see if I can't clean up some of the glasses. So I'm gonna hit Control plus to zoom in, and then hold down my space bar and click and drag over to the glasses. We're gonna add this kind of section right here to the glasses by clicking and dragging, and then I'm gonna add this part right here. And it seems to do a pretty good job. If I want to subtract this kind of background space right here, I'm going to switch to subtract at the top, or I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just click and drag, and then click and drag. It does a pretty good job of selecting that. It's not perfect, so that means we're going to switch over to the brush tool. Brush tool works like it does in the regular workspace. It's a little bit more limited, so we're going to switch to the brush tool. It's right here at the bottom, and we are going to do the exact same thing. Check our settings. Okay. Right now it's at 90 pixels. That's a bit large for what we're doing. So hit the drop down arrow, turn your size down. Okay. You can also do this with the bracket keys, and again, holding down Alt switches to subtract. Okay. And Shift and bracket will adjust the softness. So we're actually going to keep our settings right now as they are, and we're going to zoom way in here so that I can see what I'm doing on the glasses. Whoops, I messed up, so I'm going to hit Control Z there. I'm going to hold down Alt to subtract and just paint this section away. And then I'm going to use my bracket keys to make my brush smaller, and hold down Alt and just paint that away. And then I can paint with Add to kind of clean this up. And you just want to go back and forth. Hold down Alt and paint red. And then you mess up, let go of Alt and just kind of paint your sections back in. It can be kind of tedious, but if you're patient, and clean it up real nice. Just kind of working my way around here, making sure nothing is selected that I don't want selected. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Next, I'm going to use the Refine Edge brush tool. So I'm going to hit Control 0 to snap back to full view. And you'll notice the hair, right? The hair looks like it's got some white spots in it. Hair is very hard to select, and Photoshop has kind of developed this Refine Edge brush tool to help automatically select the hair. So go over to your tools on the left and click on the Refine Edge brush tool. The Refine Edge brush tool just sort of automatically detects areas of contrast and does a really good job of selecting hair. We're going to make our tool just a little bit bigger. We're going to make it about as big as the hair is. Here, I'll zoom in, Control plus. You notice my hair is kind of frizzy up here. I'm just going to make it as big as that frizz. And I'm just going to click and drag to kind of indicate where those problem areas are. It doesn't have to be real precise. And then we're going to hold down spacebar and pan over. Just going to keep working my way, keeping the crosshair kind of right on the edge here. Alright, so that just kind of cleaned up the hair a little bit automatically. I don't really need to use it anywhere else. Maybe down here I can try. That looks pretty good. And maybe down here by the beard. Okay, that looks okay. I'm not going to use it anymore. It's okay at what it does. It's not perfect. To see what is actually happening, I'll show you. So we're going to go up to the view here, and we're going to switch our view to black and white. And you notice the edge here is really complicated. The Refine Edge brush tool has just kind of gone in and noticed where we painted and automatically selected those stray hairs. The problem is that sometimes, like this section here, it selects parts of the portrait itself. So I'm going to zoom in and pan over here. So you see here, there's a bit of extra gray. We don't actually need this. This is part of the neck. So I'm going to switch to my brush tool and clean that up. Just be careful when using the Refine Edge brush tool. It will kind of intelligently select most of what you want, but not all of it. Always switch to this kind of black on white mode and just take a look at what it did. So yeah, we've got kind of a problem area there. I'm not going to worry about it too much. But yeah, just double check your Refine Edge brush after using it. Alright, so we're happy with most of what we've selected, and we've cleaned up some of the selection. And then we double checked what it looked like in black and white mode. So now we're going to go over to the right here. These are global adjustments, so only do these at the very end and when you're happy with everything else. I'm going to turn on edge detection by about like 2 pixels. And all that's going to do is just kind of automatically look at contrast and sort of clean up any edges I missed. You can check mark the smart radius if you want even more adjustment. I'm going to leave it unsmooth, and I'm going to leave the feather alone. These just add a bit of softness and a bit of smoothness to the selection. I don't need to adjust contrast. You can play with these later. Basically, they just do exactly what they say. And they're way more obvious if you turn on black and white mode. What I am going to do though is shift my edge about 20% in, and the reason for that is I just want to make sure there's no white fringe on anything. So if I shift it in about 20%, which would be negative 20%, sorry, that'll just move the edge of my selection in just a little bit and make sure there's no white. Alright, at the very end, when you're happy with all your selection, go down to output settings, okay? If it's collapsed like this, just hit the down arrow right here and switch your output to new layer with layer mask. We want to kind of copy our layer and just put it on a layer with a layer mask, so that we can adjust the layer mask later if we want to. And yeah, that's what you're going to set it to, and then click OK when you're happy. Alright, when you click OK, you're going to notice right away that if you didn't clean up your Refine Edge, like there's a little bit of haziness to the hair where you use that tool. If you ever want to adjust your mask, just double click on the mask, and you can open up your properties panel here, and you'll see the select and mask button right there. You'll also see it at the top of the screen sometimes. If you ever want to clean it up, just hit select and mask, and then you can use the tools to clean up your edges as much as you want. So I'm going to use my quick select tool and just add a little bit of this hair back into the mix and make sure I have a more solid edge. When you're all done, make sure you output to layer mask so that it only affects your layer mask and nothing else, and click OK. You notice that did a little bit of cleanup for me. Alright, the next step is to put your second image into the file. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to File and Place Embedded. Once you click on Place Embedded, you're going to navigate to your folder. Mine's already open to my folder. And I'm just going to insert this picture of mountains right here. And I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to click Place. If you don't see thumbnails, you can change your view up here. It's probably set to details by default, so just click this icon or click the drop down arrow and switch it to large icon so you can see your photos. And then click Place when you find your photo you want to use. So when you place your photo initially, it's just the size of the document. To resize your image, hold down the Shift key and click and drag on the edge here to constrain it. For any version of Photoshop that's 2018 or older. For the new Photoshop, they fixed that, and now you don't have to hold shift down, which is really convenient. Just resize your picture to the size you want it to be in your double exposure. So I'm going to make it about the size of my head. I'm going to move it up just a little bit here and over. Okay, like that. And then I'm happy with it. So I'm going to hit the check mark. All right, once you've placed your image, you're going to want to hide the image first and then make a selection to create the mask for your image. So go over to your layer panel and click on the eyeball icon next to the image you just placed to hide it. And then we're going to make a selection of the portrait. So we're going to click on the portrait layer right here. And then we're going to make what's called a color range selection. To make a color range selection, you simply have to go to Select menu, go to the Select menu, and then go down to Color Range and click on that option. You're going to see a box pop up, a dialog box called Color Range, and you can click on your photo to tell it what color range you want, and then you can switch to your Add to Sample color dropper and then add more colors to your sample area. So if I just wanted my kind of warm shadow colors, I could click in here and kind of select my shadows. Or if I just wanted to sample all of the darker colors, I could go to the very top and switch it from sampled colors to shadows. So I'm going to click on shadows, and that seems to select most of the portrait because most of the portrait is in shadows, and I'm happy with that. So I'm going to click OK to make that my selection. Alright, so it looks like I've selected most of my shadows here. So I'm going to use this as the basis for my layer mask for the second image. So I'm going to go back to my layer panel now and turn on that second layer. And I'm going to click on that second layer to make sure that it's active. It should be highlighted gray if it's active. And then I'm going to make my selection a layer mask by going to the bottom of the layer panel and clicking on this icon right here. It looks like a rectangle with a black circle in the middle of it. Just click on that. It will add a layer mask using the selection you already have. So I made a layer mask, and it looks pretty good. It looks like it's masked out most of the shadow areas. There's a little bit of a fringe on the edge there. It's okay. We can fix that later. And it looks like I didn't line up my photo at the top of the head. So right now you can actually adjust that. You can adjust the position of your mask and your image. But most of the time you're just going to want to move your image around. So first, make sure you unlink the connection between your layer mask, which is this black and white thumbnail, and your image, which is on the left. So click on that chain link icon, and then to move the image around, you want to make sure your image is active, so click on the image, and then make sure you're using your move tool. Your move tool is at the top of the toolbox, okay? And then you can move your image around and kind of position it how you want it. You can also resize your image. Go to the top of your control panel here and make sure you turn on transform controls. So if it's turned off like that, make sure you click and activate that checkbox right there. And all that means is you can stretch your image. So again, hold down shift and stretch your image. Okay, make it bigger, smaller. You can kind of make it however you want. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger here and kind of move my mountains over here. And then I'm going to hit the check mark at the top of the screen right here. So I've moved my image around independent of my mask. Right now I'm going to go back to my layer panel and you're going to make sure that you activate that chain link again. And then I'm going to edit my mask using the brush tool. Notice your layer mask is right here. Click on it to activate it, and it's white and black. White will show pixels and black will hide pixels. So we can use our paintbrush to adjust this mask however we want. So I'm actually going to paint a little bit of my face back into the photo here. So to do that, I'm going to switch to my brush tool. Okay, I'm going to hit the B key on my keyboard. And then I'm going to go down to the bottom and make sure that I have the default color set. I can hit the D key on my keyboard or just click on this thumbnail of the black and white. And again, I can switch colors by clicking on this double arrow here, or I can hit the X on my keyboard. At the very top of your screen, you can adjust the size of your brush using a slider, and then you can adjust the hardness as well. Okay? You can also do that with your bracket keys. If you use your bracket keys, you'll make your brush larger or smaller, and then holding down Shift and bracket will make it softer or harder. So, again, white shows pixels and black hides. So I'm going to hide some of these pixels of the mountain and kind of make it blend more naturally with the face. So I'm going to hit the X key on my keyboard to switch to black, and then I'm just going to kind of click and drag here and paint some of this back in. If I want different opacities, I can do that. To change your opacity, go to the top and just slide down your opacity. Or you can hit the number keys. Each number key stands for a 10%. So if I want 50%, I just hit the 5 key and it'll automatically go to 50%. The 0 key goes to 100. I'm just going to kind of make it look sort of cloudy up here. You know, it's entirely subjective what you do. You can do pretty much whatever you want. Again, hit the X key if you painted too much and you want the photo to come back in. Alright, so I'm kind of happy with up here. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to hide some of this gravel, make it kind of blend in with my shirt. And then I can paint even more of the mountains in here to the left if I want. I'm going to make my brush a bit bigger. We're going to make it 100%. Whoops, Control Z to mess up. If you ever mess up a lot, go to your history panel and just go back a step. You can go back in time as far as you want by clicking on a history state. So I'm actually going to paint. I'm going to paint most of these mountains back into the picture here, because I like this picture. All right, there we go. So that's kind of cool. I'm happy with that. I can do kind of whatever I want here. Again, it's totally subjective. Play around with it. Once you're happy with it, this is basically your double exposure. So once you're done kind of adjusting your mask, if you want, you can add a background layer and you can add adjustment layers. So I'll do some adjustment layers here for my portrait. So I'm going to click on my portrait layer, and then I'm just going to do a hue saturation adjustment layer. So I'm going to click in my adjustment panel on hue saturation. And I'm just going to turn down the saturation just a little bit to make it a bit colder. And then I'm going to make sure I touch this button right here. This is going to clip the adjustment layer to the layer below. So if I click on this, it will only adjust the portrait layer below it. And that's important if you're going to put a background layer behind it or any other layers. It just makes sure that your adjustment layer is only affecting the layer you want it to affect, which is the layer below. So here's the difference. It's a very warm portrait, and I just made it a bit more desaturated. I could play with it more, but you get the idea. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some background color. So I'm going to click on my background layer right here, so that when I add a new layer, it's at the very bottom of my layer panel. And I'm going to go down to this kind of half white, half black circle and click on it. And then these are some pretty common adjustment layers. At the very top are color layers. So I'm going to add a gradient. So I'm going to click on gradient. And by default, there's a bunch of gradients in this drop down panel right here, so I'm going to click on the drop down arrow, and let's just do a simple black and white gradient. And to adjust your gradient, you can do stuff like the angle if you want. You can do a different kind of style like radial if you want. I'm going to keep it linear, but I'm going to change my colors to some darker bluish grays. So to adjust a gradient, just double click on it, and that'll open up the gradient editor. In the gradient editor, to change a color, just click on its color stop, and you can kind of pick a different color. So I'm going to pick kind of a bluish gray over here, and you can see it happening kind of in real time on the left. So that looks good. I'll click OK. You can also use these sliders to kind of adjust your gradient if you want. To move the white slider in, we could make this, double click on that and make it kind of a light gray if we wanted to. There we go. Okay. When you're happy with it, just click OK, and then click OK. You can kind of do whatever you want with this. When you're all done, make sure you've cleaned up your edges on your masks. Make sure you have a nice, crisp, clear edge. I've got a little bit of fringing in here, so I probably would go in and bring in my mask a little bit. I got a straight line on the bottom here, which I should paint away. So just go back to your mask. You can paint back and forth on any of the masks as much as you want. You can add as many adjustment layers as you want and filters as you want. When you're all done editing your masks and playing around with your transparency and just generally happy with your image, you're going to save this as a Photoshop file. So go to File, Save, make sure it's saved as a Photoshop file, and then you're going to save it as a JPEG to print it and hand it in. So go to File, Save As, and then change your Save As type from Photoshop to JPEG. And then you can give it a different name or like a version number. So version 1. And then you can adjust your mask or change your photo or do whatever you want. Then click Save to save it as a JPEG. When this pops up, click OK. And there you go. That's a double exposure photo illustration. Again, this is just how I do it. You can kind of do it however you want. There's no right or wrong way to do it, as long as you're combining kind of a portrait image with something else.